Welcome back to Focus on Health. As always, I'm Lauren Buck, the Director of Public Health for the City of Revere, and I'm here today with two of my great colleagues to talk a little bit about mental health since May is Mental Health Awareness Month. First, I'm going to introduce Kate. Kate Moore is the Director for Emergency Services for North Suffolk Community Services. She's a licensed independent clinical social worker. She works in Revere and Chelsea very closely with our police departments in co-responder models, and she also manages the mobile crisis team for the newest resource available to our residents and our first responders, called the Community Behavioral Health Center, which we'll talk a little bit later on in the program. I'm also here with Captain Amy O'Hara. She runs the Bureau of Community Services for Revere Police. She also heads up the BHU, or Behavioral Health Unit, which is a new unit to the Revere Police Department that targets frequent calls of service whose origin might be because of behavioral health issues. So as I mentioned, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So today we're going to have a discussion with my two esteemed colleagues here about some current trends in mental health that we're seeing in our Revere community specifically. We're going to try to educate you about some of these programs that might be helpful to you or some of your loved ones that are out there watching right now. And we're also going to just continue the conversation about how important it is to destigmatize talking about mental health and mental health struggles, because it's so common and we need to continue to do that. So our first topic is we want to talk about how we hear on the news, we know personally, we have anecdotes that show us that since the pandemic, people have been feeling an increase of anxiety, loneliness, isolation. So Kate, what can you tell us about what you've seen over the last few years in Revere specifically about people struggling with mental health issues? What are you seeing?
We see so much of the anxiety, depression, like you were talking about, and isolation. People were forced to be in their homes, were not seeing friends or colleagues at work or in school, and it really caused a bigger issue for everybody about that isolation.
Yeah.
And having kids go back to school has been really difficult, especially for kids that were in kindergarten or first grade when the pandemic started, because they didn't have multiple years of schooling and then were forced back in to the school building. So we're seeing a lot of issues within the schools as well.
Yeah, and I think it's probably safe for you to say that even though we've returned a little bit to a sense of normalcy, that these issues, isolation, loneliness, anxiety, mental health issues in general do continue. It doesn't necessarily mean everyone goes back to normal, right?
Absolutely. And people already had these issues. These were not things that were new to us from the pandemic, but they definitely were exacerbated during that time.
Absolutely, yeah. So Captain O'Hara, what can you tell us about, have you seen any similar trends in calls to the Revere Police Department, and what is your work in the community have shown you over the last couple of years about trends that you're seeing in your field?
Yeah, we have seen an increase of mentally ill individuals encountering law enforcement, and we also can measure this by the hospitalizations that emanate out of a call of service.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we just identified that the mental health struggles in Revere are prevalent. We're not immune. Our community isn't immune to struggling with these issues. And so we want to talk a little bit about some of the resources that you might not know about, some things that are new in our community to really address mental health issues. So let's first talk about Kate. Let's talk about the Community Behavioral Health Center that's relatively new. It's in East Boston, but it's really available to Revere residents. So let's talk a little bit about it and how someone in Revere would be able to utilize that.
Yeah, so we also call it the CBHC is the short for the term. And it's a new way of doing mental health in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts ended up having 25 of these CBHCs throughout the Commonwealth. And we at North Suffolk are one of those 25. And so we are located in East Boston at 14 Porter Street. We're open 24 hours a day for mobile crisis. So we have clinicians available 24 hours a day that you can call into our hotline. And we can either have a clinician come to you at home in Revere or wherever you are within the area, or we can have you come into us. So you can come over to East Boston and we are able to see you in real time. And with those services, we also have not just the crisis services, which is my team, but we have urgent and routine, which people can walk into that same building at 14 Porter Street 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9 to 5 Saturday, Sunday, and get those services, get therapy, get set up with providers in real time. So there is no more of that long wait when you're feeling like you need that support. We're there 24 hours a day.
And we're going to be putting a phone number on the bottom of your screen. And Kate, the phone number is a 24/7 behavioral health hotline. Is that correct?
It is. So it's staffed by my clinicians. They're master's level clinicians. They're 24 hours a day, always available to take those calls.
Great. And let's talk now with Captain O'Hara about the behavioral health unit at the Revere PD. This is a new unit that started, and actually one of the reasons that all three of us are here together today talking, because we all work in conjunction as a team. But Captain O'Hara, tell us a little bit about the behavioral health unit, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how we all work together.
Right. Well, I did say that we've seen an increase in calls of service dealing with mentally ill individuals, and we saw that the conventional response was not working, and there was limited communications between our agencies to help collaborate and solve some of these ongoing issues. And to give an example, even for people at home, for instance, I know of 4 individuals in the last 4 months. We've had 389 calls of service just with those 4 individuals. Now we have over 30,000 calls of service. So we know that what we were doing as law enforcement wasn't really working. So we became recipients of a grant, Equitable Approaches to Public Safety through DPH, and that allowed us to embed a behavioral health unit in the PD. And so what that incorporates is we have Kate as a clinician, we have a social worker, a program coordinator, and we work with other agencies in the city to develop collaborative alternative solutions to these calls of service. And it helps decrease call of service, that's our ultimate goal, and then prevent unnecessary incarceration and hospitalization.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about how what a week looks like in terms of the BHU. I know there's weekly case management meetings that we sit in on, and kind of what do the team members do? They're going out into the community. Talk to us about what it looks like.
Well, first of all, we've changed the way we document calls of service. Like I said, over 30,000 calls of service. We're now able to document what calls have behavioral health related issues. And once an officer is on scene able to do that, we deal with high-risk individuals, those that have frequent encounter with police, fire, and EMS. Those cases are now referred to the behavioral health unit. And we work, our model is an intense case management model where we work together to come up with alternative solutions and work as a team to continue that care. Prior to this, an officer would just go to a call of service and then just keep going. And the gap was what's going on after that call of service. So now, like for instance, the team has been fully operational for about 2 months now. So last month we had 100 cases that referred that were behavioral health related, and we've conducted almost 80 calls of follow-up services. Now, prior to that, there would be no follow-up. But the team now follows up and then continues with care.
Right. And I think something that's really important for all of our viewers out there to know is that this behavioral health unit, it's a collaborative approach, right? So we have Kate who's working from a social work perspective. We have outreach workers from the public health perspective. It's all headed up under Captain O'Hara at the police department, but it's really a model that's supposed to work together and address a full range of issues that potentially high-frequency callers or high-frequency utilizers at Revere PD are experiencing. So, Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about your role in the BHU?
Yeah, I think in general it makes all of our jobs easier because we're working together with the same clients, the same residents of Revere or wherever they are. And we're giving them the services that they need and not just siloing people into different agencies. Yeah. So what my role has been is to really just support the BHU to help figure out what behavioral health needs somebody needs and connect them to those services. Right. So we're able to go out and meet with people and talk to them, and it's a different approach. It's not a police officer showing up because there was an issue, but it's a police officer showing up with a team because we care.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's important to know that a lot of calls of service that we go to are sometimes at night, no one's around, 2 in the morning, 7 o'clock at night, and it's important, you know, we look at why we're talking about this right now, because we look across the country. We want to make sure that officers are on scene and de-escalating these calls of service and getting resources to people that need them. You know, I can say that the state recently mandated crisis intervention training for officers only just a couple of years ago. At the Revere Police Department, we've already incorporated that training almost 10 years ago. So almost 100% of our officers have this particular specialized training. And it helps them recognize the signs and symptoms of mental illness, and then give them the skills and knowledge to identify somebody that has a psychiatric illness, a development disorder, or a substance use disorder. And they're on scene and they do a really good job at de-escalating, but then they work with the behavioral health team to then work to continuum of care and get those resources.
Yeah.
What's funny about that is that I was helping to train those officers before we even knew that we were going to work together. So I was always helping to train at those CIT trainings.
Right, right.
So it's an interesting way that we all came together.
Right. And you know what I want to mention is that, you know, we also recognize there was limited communication. So now Public Health, Kate Moore at North Suffolk Community Service, and us, and then the SUDI office, we all work together to collaborate and come up with a solution that sets somebody up for success. You know, in addition to that, over at Chelsea District Court, they just launched Mental Health Court, and we've met with Judge Prince over there, and that's another way to divert somebody to try to get them services before they become involved with the criminal justice system. Yep. Because, again, a lot of these calls of service we go to, there's no criminal nexus.
Right.
But they become criminal nexus if you don't continue to outreach and get these resources that are needed.
It's so true. Yeah, and so I think, you know, the last thing that we want to talk about today is just, you know, we've talked a lot about our recognition that mental health is a real illness, is something that people struggle with. It's very common. But you know, there's still a lot of stigma attached to mental health illness, behavioral health issues. And so I think just in our closing thoughts, Kate, why don't you start and say, what do you think is one of the most important pieces of advice that you would give someone who is maybe personally struggling, or sees a family member or friend or someone that they know struggling with mental health issues? Just a piece of advice about how, you know, pushing through that stigma and recognizing that it's very common. What would you tell people?
That there's always help. There's always people that are there to listen, whether it's a police officer or a clinician or 988, where you can call nationally to receive support. So we're all here to help. Everyone deals with something, and it's a way that we can really work together to help people feel better, connected.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. And Captain O'Hara, let's finish with you. You can have some final comments. I've worked with you a lot, and I know you really recognize and have a true understanding about the importance of talking about these issues and recognizing that people need help for really what's going on underneath the surface. Why don't you tell us about, you know, someone in the law enforcement field, give some perspective on what you see every day, some maybe the misconceptions that people have about police and dealing with people who are struggling with mental health issues, as I know you feel so passionate about this topic.
Right. Like I said, we're always looking to improve our response, and we were ahead of the curve by sending our officers to crisis intervention training. But now incorporating a behavioral health unit actually allows us to demonstrate that integrating this type of unit actually does help to improve our responses. It really is making it, we're seeing successes right away with this unit. It just allows us to improve our response and just to get ahead of things before it becomes a crisis.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much to both of you for talking to me today. Again, just reminding all our viewers out there, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so the phone number that we put on the screen earlier is a phone number that you can use 24/7 if you're ever in need of help. And we just want to remind you, everyone out there in Revere, that we have some resources available. We're thinking about this a lot in the police department, in North Suffolk Community Services, and in the public health department. It's something that we recognize that is super important to talk about, and we wanted to talk to you today about it. So as always, stay healthy, Revere, and thank you so much for your time.